Hello, and welcome to another in the series of IELTSLearningTips.com videos. Today I'm going to address IELTS reading, and I want to talk about the importance of speed in doing the reading test. And I want to outline my 1 minute rule, which means 1 minute per question, and how to manage this so that you can finish all the questions in the time and make sure that you get the maximum number of answers correct. Before I move on to the slideshow that I've prepared, I just want to say one thing about the 1 minute rule and about time generally with the reading. And that is that don't focus on the time if you are not getting a high enough score in your practice. The first thing that you must focus on is getting the answers correct. Now, even if it takes you an hour and a half or even 2 hours to do all the questions, it's really important that you focus on the answers before you worry about the time. In my experience, if you can get most of the answers correct each time, then the timing will sort itself out, and you'll find that that will reduce bit by bit until your timing shouldn't be much beyond the hour. So please don't focus on doing everything in the time from the beginning. Make sure you can get lots of correct answers before you start to worry about the time. So let's imagine then that you have done all of this and that you generally are getting around the score that you need. So if you're looking for band 7, you should be getting 30, 32, 33 correct every time. But perhaps it's taking you an hour and 10 or an hour and 15 minutes. So in order to reduce that time to less than an hour, you really do need to follow the 1 minute rule. So I'm going to share my little presentation that I've done, and we can look carefully at how you can achieve this. So if you don't follow this rule, then it's going to be quite difficult to get all of the questions done in the time. So you have 60 minutes for 40 questions, and that is roughly a minute per question. Okay. So what does happen if you take longer? Several things can happen. You might not finish the test. This is quite a common occurrence that students tell me, I only had 5 minutes for the last 5 questions, or I only had 10 minutes for passage 3. Passage 3 is going to take you longer. However good you are, it will take you a little bit longer because the questions are trickier. So if you run out of time in passage 3, then it's going to be very difficult for you to achieve your score. Yeah, it's difficult to get a high band if you don't finish. You can't afford to make many mistakes, and if you're doing general training, then you have no wiggle room at all. So it's really important that you manage your time. This also happens. People get into a panic because they're worried about the time, and then they really don't see the wood for the trees. They really don't focus well on the questions, make lots of changes, and that makes it difficult for whoever is marking it. And if they cannot work out what your answer is, they'll mark it wrong. So it's really important not to panic, to stay calm and do it all in a very systematic way. That's another thing that happens. People then miss out answers, jump here, there, and everywhere, put the wrong answers against the wrong questions, and then the whole thing goes haywire. And this is another problem. People start looking at what other people are doing. Somebody else may look as though they're nearly finished, and then you start thinking, oh dear, everybody's finished, I'm the only one that's not finished. And all of this comes into your head. It distracts you, and it stops you from focusing, and it stops you from doing a good job in the test. So if you can't manage the time, it just creates all this panic and chaos. So it's really important to be systematic and tell yourself there's plenty of time and manage it well. Okay. So it is easily possible if you are able to answer the questions, and that depends on your level, on your language level, on your level of vocabulary. And that's why, as I said earlier, it's really important to get those things right first before you even worry at all about the time. Okay, so why might it be difficult to do this? As I've said, if your English level is not good enough, you're going to struggle. If your techniques are not good enough, you're going to struggle. So if you're not good at identifying and matching keywords, if you're not good at skimming or scanning, then you need to address these strategies and techniques first before you worry about the time. The timing should be the last thing that you address. And this is also possible. It takes a lot of practice. So if you haven't done enough practice, then, you know, it's going to be a lot more difficult to achieve this. And if you get terribly nervous, that also can distract you and make you panic. But the answer to nerves is practice. The more you practice, the more confident you become, the less nervous you are. So everything hinges on A, making sure your language level is good, B, making sure that you have good techniques in skimming, scanning, and finding keywords and matching keywords and paraphrasing, and then making sure that you work systematically and quickly, but you must do it in that order. Okay, so when you do allow a minute per question and you have the right level and the right techniques, this is what happens. You can complete it, and I have done a video on this before, and I know lots of students who can complete the test in 50 minutes. Generally, if I'm doing a test, and remember I'm native speaker, teacher, and I have a lot of experience, I can usually complete the test in half an hour, sometimes a little less. But that's because I've done lots and lots and lots years of practice. So if you do a lot of practice, you should be able to complete it in about 50 minutes. Maybe 55 if it's a particularly tricky test. And then you've got time to go over any questions that you're still doubtful about. But if you've done it well and you've managed the time well, there'll only be 1 or 2 questions where you're doubtful. Okay, in this situation, you're not going to panic. It will be more systematic, and you'll be able to see everything that you need to see in order to answer the question. And you'll feel more confident, and that confidence will make you approach the test in a far better way. But without the practice, it won't work. Okay, so these types of questions do take some time, and they may take a little bit longer than others. Headings, you need to skim the whole paragraph, so that's going to take a bit of time. Where you're matching information to a paragraph, you may need to look through, like the headings, lots of different paragraphs. Where you're matching a beginning and an ending, again, it's a little bit sometimes like looking for a needle in a haystack. So therefore, you really need to be able to match those keywords really well. And you need to be able to move on. If you can't find the answer, move to the next one and the next one, and then come back. This is all part of the 1-minute rule. If you can't find the answer, go to the next question. And then if you can't find the answer to the next question, go to the 3rd question. Just keep moving until you can find an answer, and then go backwards until you finish the section. Classification questions where you have it's A or it's B, or it's both A and B, or it's neither A and B, they also can take a little bit of time. So if you have these questions, you're going to need a little bit more time, therefore you need to manage the others faster. Okay, so move on. Often what happens is, as you're looking for another question, the one you couldn't find suddenly pops up. If you're matching, say, 5 choices against 5 endings, the more that you can match, the fewer you have to choose from. So by not spending too much time on the first one and trying to do the third or the fourth or the fifth, then you'll reduce the number of choices. And when you go back to number one, you may only have to choose between 3 endings. So it makes it easier. You've got 3 times to come back and check. When you finish, say, the headings, if there are 1 or 2 you're not sure of, you can go back. When you finish that passage, before you move on to the next passage, you can go back and have another quick look. And then finally, at the end of the test, if you have 5 or 10 minutes, you've got plenty of time to go back and look at those few questions that you're not completely confident about. And this is the way I do it when I'm working with students. I'll put a question mark, and then when I finish the test, I'll go back and I'll look at those again. Okay, so panic causes error. This is very true. The more you panic, the less you'll be able to find. You won't be able to focus. You become a headless chicken. And I've seen this so many times with students, rushing from paragraph to paragraph, grabbing a word here, grabbing a word there, unsystematically, and really it's a waste of time because you'll never find anything if you're just rushing through the texts like that. You have to be systematic. That's what I mean is, don't tie down any question, and it's especially true in headings and things like that. So don't always assume that your answer is correct in every type of question. It might be wrong, and then that means that the others will be wrong. So keep an open mind. If you go through the matching and you find a keyword that's going to be easier to find, start with that one. Even if it's number 3 or 4, if it's going to be easier to find, it's a good one to start with. And then go backwards to the ones that are harder. Okay, in headings, pick more than one option. So don't just pick one heading unless it's very obvious. And I had a video last week about headings. So if you haven't seen that video, I urge you to go back and look at it, because I went through the heading showing you how to make sure that you don't get the wrong one by having 2 or 3 choices. As you work systematically, things will start to fall into place. And the more you practice this, the easier it will become. And if you have all the right keywords, the right location, the answer should just pop out. There is plenty of time. Remind yourself, there is plenty of time. If you couldn't do it in an hour, the test setters would not give you an hour. They'd give you longer. So it is absolutely possible. And if you're a band 7 and 8 candidate, then there should be more than enough time. So if you cannot do it in the time and you cannot maintain a high score, you need to address your vocabulary or your language level or your reading skills. Okay, so I hope that's helpful. As ever, I've written an accompanying article to this, which you can find on my website, IELTSlearningtips.com. There are also other free resources there for you, so head over there and have a look at what there is. Just keep working on this and managing your time as I've suggested. It really does work, and I've proved that with many, many students that I've worked with who've got high bands, 7.5, 8, 8.5, and I've even had 2 or 3 recently who've got band 9. So these techniques work, but they do take some practice, and you cannot do it overnight. Okay, thank you for watching. I hope that you go away now and practice those techniques, and I'll see you on the next video.